The ProWrestleMachine is back from excursion with another video. Let's go ahead and dive. May 27, 1996 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Pro Wrestler vs. Pro Wrestling in UFC. Diesel and Razor Ramon leave WWE after MSG curtain call. Tons more. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 95009-1228. May 27, 1996. There was never a dull moment when the Ultimate Fighting Championships came to Detroit. At least until the main event. There were last-second negotiations in court to keep the show alive. There were last-second negotiations to fill a hole in the card. There was the hardest-fought and most brutal fight in the history of the UFC. And then there was the most important legitimate contest between two-star pro wrestlers in the United States in perhaps 70 years. And it turned into the worst match in the history of UFC, and yet another defining moment as a rapidly changing sport changed once again. When the dust cleared, Dan Severn emerged as the World Superfight Champion, winning a split decision over Ken Shamrock after a 30-minute double overtime match which contained almost no body contact except for a 6-minute surge in the latter stages of regulation time. It was a fight neither could afford to lose because so much in their careers were riding on it, and both knew that the other could beat them if they made one mistake. So Severn kept dancing to his left, away from Shamrock's powerful right hand. Shamrock kept pivoting to follow him. A few glancing blows were thrown. 10 of the great shooters of our time were waiting for the other to shoot. After 70 years of being legendary, modern-day fans finally saw what the Strangler Louis-Joe Stecher 5-hour match really looked like. Or what longtime wrestling fans will vaguely recall as the most publicized legitimate shoot, and yes, it was a legitimate match, involving a pro wrestler ever marketed in the United States, the 1976 Muhammad Ali vs. Antonio Inoki fiasco. And why there was never another of either. The sold-out crowd of 11,200 at Cobo Arena booed both Severn, who got a hometown hero response throughout the show whenever his face would appear on the video wall, and Shamrock, whose crowd reaction and hatred would have made the best pro wrestling heels in their heyday proud, after the 5-minute mark. However, the two stuck to their approach of waiting for the other to make his move, and both patiently waited to capitalize on the first mistake. Chants of boring refund, bullshit. Let's go Red Wings, and more were heard throughout the match. Fans were throwing things. Shamrock, who wouldn't make a move, gave saying come on to Severn, inviting him and daring him to attack. Ref John McCarthy was screaming at both men to try something. And Semaphore Entertainment Group officials at ringside had that look promoters get when seeing a show which up to that point had been very successful, look as if it was falling apart before their eyes. Even after the match ended and Severn was awarded the decision in dramatic fashion after a most undramatic of fights, the crowd largely booed. Not because they disagreed with the judge's decision, but because the crowd felt it was a fight that both men deserved to lose. Just moments earlier, Severn's protege, Don Fry, came out as the latest superstar of the UFC, destroying Amari Bittetti, winner of the World Jiu-Jitsu Championships this past February in the absolute, unlimited, weight division. UFC is largely a battle of styles, in that fighter A because of style can beat B, and B can beat C, but often because of style, C can then beat A. The mystique of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu superiority, spawned by the success of Royce and Rickson Gracie and later by cousins Renzo and Ralph in various no-rules events around the world, was given a stiff beating from punches, knees, forearms, and elbows. Fry showed the BJJ's system's Achilles heel, as all fighting systems have. The combination of a wrestler with good enough balance to avoid being taken down by a BJJ practitioner, and a boxer with enough punching power and skill on his feet, and the intelligence to avoid being maneuvered into a bad position can beat what to this point appeared to be the most applicable martial arts fighting system in the world. But after the most violent, dangerous, and bloodiest show in UFC history, just hours after a judge mandated several rule changes that were supposed to make the event safer, the future is once again in question. The biggest UFC event in history was nearly cancelled at the last minute. What looked to be the biggest fight of the year was a total dud to all but the few people who are such martial arts aficionados that they saw the totally unentertaining match as a fascinating chess match. The only problem was that at least for the first 18 minutes, chess would be more entertaining. With Canada and much of the Northeast blacked out from the pay-per-view due to cable company decisions, promoter Semaphore Entertainment Group is taking the hit on both ends. Greater expenses because of the constant court cases to prevent stopping the live events. Less revenue because the largest percentage yet, 16%, of the pay-per-view universe refused to carry the show, particularly in Canada where the buy rates are twice as high as in the United States, due to the controversy that surrounds it and stemming from the EFC fiasco in Canada. Because Canada is so strong for UFC, that probably means a greater than 20% overall hit in total event revenue. There were irate phone calls to cable companies by disenfranchised UFC fans in several major cities in Canada, which got newspaper coverage in those cities about the local companies getting their hands tied when Viewers' Choice of Canada wouldn't put the signal up. And while there were no serious injuries, serious in the sense of being compared with sports like boxing or football, this show was hardly like Denver in that it appeared to be a series of wrestling matches with a few knees and elbows thrown in. There was blood in every match. There was nothing even close to a submission hold on the show. Shamrock after the show admitted that in both UFC and Pancrase, as the skill level of blocking and experience of the competitors increase, it becomes harder to apply the arm breakers and knee bar submission finishers which were the in vogue maneuvers and made people like him, Royce Gracie and Oleg Toktarov so dangerous. The previous night, at the biggest Pancrase card of the year and another pay-per-view taping, only 2 of the 9 matches ended with submissions. And the new rules laid down in court that afternoon banning closed fist punches and headbutts were flagrantly violated in just about every match. Actually, 2 new stars came out of the first non-tournament in UFC history. Aside from Fry, the best credentialed all-around wrestler ever to enter the no-rules arena made a shocking and unscheduled debut. Mark Schultz, 33, a 3-time NCAA champion, 2-time world champion and a 1984 Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling at 181 pounds, decided at noon the day of the show to accept the invitation to replace Dave Beneteau in a match against Gary Goodridge. Schultz, originally from Palo Alto, California, who the younger brother of the recently murdered David Schultz, is a wrestling coach at Brigham Young University. He helped train Beneteau for this fight, helped train Tank Abbott for the Ultimate, and had trained and had private competitions in the past with Rickson Gracie. According to legend, Schultz was always able to take Gracie down and get on top, and able to keep position on top. However, Schultz could never make Gracie tap out, while Gracie, waiting patiently on the bottom for a mistake, was able to capitalize and eventually make Schultz tap. Semaphore Entertainment Group was hit with the Beneteau bombshell the day before the event. Beneteau had fractured his hand in training more than 3 weeks ago, but concealed the injury because either he was so tough he didn't care, or because he wanted to redeem himself from 2 few recent quick losses to Oleg Toktarov, or because he wanted the payoff, and probably a little of each. Beneteau, who lives in nearby Windsor, Ontario, had already scheduled surgery for his hand for the morning after the fight, figuring the damage he was going to do to himself. He even managed to conceal the injury in his first physical since the doctor had no reason to check his hand. But the rumor got out that day, and during a second physical, the doctor refused to allow him to go on, sending Semaphore Entertainment Group officials scrambling for a replacement about 24 hours before showtime. The lobby of the Westin in downtown Detroit was filled with fighters, as UFC events have become a convention of names known within the somewhat secretive and rumor-filled world of Vale Tudo competition. Schultz, who had been in and out of negotiations with Semaphore Entertainment Group for several months, with officials previously saying his asking price was way too high, and indicated when Beneteau was waved off that he might want to give it a try. The sides agreed on a price and stipulations, basically, a promise that he'd be in the next tournament if he wanted to be, rather quickly, but Schultz was noncommittal before going to sleep Thursday night. On Friday morning, Semaphore Entertainment Group had talked with a few fighters and eventually decided on a protege of Shamrock over a protege of Severn, pro wrestler Geza Coleman Jr., to take Beneteau's spot. But that wasn't the only storyline being played the day before the show. A federal court of appeals in Cincinnati the day before the show refused to hear the Michigan State and Wayne County prosecutors' attempt to get an injunction barring the event based on the obscure and never-before-enforced 1869 provision banning all prize fighting in Michigan, which has since been amended to allow only boxing and tough man competition. However, the judge sent the case back to state court, where a final hearing was scheduled in front of Judge Arthur J. Lombard at 1 p.m. the day of the fight in a courthouse that was walking distance from the Cobo. As officials readied themselves to go to court, Schultz phoned down and said he'd take the match, and they put together contracts to sign immediately. And next thing you know, it's all rise time in a packed courthouse filled with television cameras from everyone from local TV and radio stations to a film crew working on a UFC documentary to CNN News. Most of the negotiations between the government prosecutors, Lombard and Semaphore Entertainment Group lawyers, along with testimony from UFC Dr. Richard Istrico, referee McCarthy, and promoter Bob Marowitz, were in judges' chambers, behind closed doors. At 2:30 p.m. Lombard and the principals emerged, with Marowitz looking none too happy. Lombard, with cameras ablazing, gave a speech filled with pre-packaged one-liners, and came forth with a decision worthy of Salomon, only it was Salomon Grundy, not King Salomon. After viewing a tape he picked up the previous night at Blockbuster, He said that part of UFC looked like boxing, parts like wrestling, and parts like martial arts. Since boxing is only allowed in Michigan through a series of state-mandated regulatory practices, licensing fighters, getting a promoter's license, etc., and that this event hadn't gone through those procedures, he didn't want to allow any boxing. However, he felt the 1869 law itself did not apply to this event since he didn't see UFC as prize fighting since he saw prize fighting as synonymous with boxing, something prosecutors violently disagreed with. So to make the event look more like wrestling and martial arts, he decreed to deny the government's injunction attempting to shut down the show, but that all closed-fist punches and headbutts would be banned. Merowitz was in a position where he either had to agree or have the show stopped, which would be a seven-figure hit, and thus was in no position to hold his ground on principle. However, the end result of agreeing in court to amend the rules, and then having an event where those rules were regularly violated, could come back to hurt Merowitz when other communities attempt to stop the live shows from taking place. The prosecutors, in particular Michigan Assistant Attorney General Michael Lockman, weren't satisfied, wanting the judge to issue an injunction banning punches and headbutts, figuring either the fighters wouldn't listen or the rules wouldn't be enforced. The judge felt since he had the promoter's word those two moves would be banned, he didn't need to issue an injunction. Merowitz also said in court that he'd never run another show in Wayne County again despite the record advance, although didn't go so far as to agree not to do another show in Michigan. Istrico, in the courthouse after testifying to things like safety record and precautions taken in the event, in 4 different court outings over the past 3 weeks, muttered under his breath something about nobody ever paying attention once again. After the hearing, when Lockman was asked how come this law had never been used to shut down other combat sports previously such as wrestling, judo or kickboxing events, said it was because the prosecutors simply didn't know these events had ever taken place, but noted that the law was used several years back in attempting to shut down tough man events. However, even those events were allowed to go on when the state legislature gave tough man events an exemption from the law. It was noted in the hearing that the law doesn't apply to pro wrestling because it was testified in 1995 to the state legislature that pro wrestling was a sham in order to remove it from the auspices of the Athletic Commission. I'm not sure what that means about all the pro wrestling in Michigan before 1995. Word of the decision quickly filtered through to the fighters. The general consensus was that they didn't believe the rules were going to be enforced and it was expected fighters would simply do what they'd trained themselves to do once the gate closed. The reaction by Ken and Bob Shamrock, having gotten the word while watching a newscast, was vehement. Most everyone else independently decided to violate the rules, even Severn, who grew up in a sports background where he always adhered to rules. Severn himself found his own personal contradictions of his own sportsmanship and what he wound up doing in the fight rather ironic. Shamrock, for whatever reason, decided he wouldn't throw a punch or a headbutt. If those were the rules laid out, he was going to win the match within the rules, although finally late in the fight he ended up closing his fists and threw 2 or 3. After the third fight of the show, the third fight with punches and headbutts, and the third fight with blood, Detroit Police Chief Isaiah McKinnon stormed out of the Cobo. "I've seen enough," he said as he left. "There appeared to be a clear violation of the rules. This is headbutting. There is punching. They're not going by the rules the judge set down. The punching and butting blatantly violate the agreement. My recommendation is that the prosecutor's office confiscate a tape of this and look at it." No announcement of the supposed rule change was made either to the audience live, some of whom had seen or heard the TV and radio news reports but many of whom hadn't. It was never acknowledged on television about any rule change, and fans at home couldn't figure out whenever punches were thrown why Ref McCarthy continually screamed at the combatants to open their fists. At one point Don Wilson acknowledged McCarthy's remarks saying that he was saying it to protect the fighters from breaking their hands, but the court case and agreement was never brought up. UFC does deserve credit as compared with recent pro wrestling shows for immediately in both the pregame show and pay-per-view show acknowledging the substitutions on the show, something that needed to be done since the pre-taped television ads on all the cable stations listed Marco Ruiz in the semi-main event. A famous boxer once said after winning a boring fight that when people pick up the newspaper the next day and read about the fight, they don't remember if it was good or bad, they only remember who won and who lost. Severn, who weighed 247.9 pounds more than he weighed at the Ultimate and 5 pounds heavier than for the first Shamrock match due to heavy consumption of Met-RX and heavier lifting, came out of the fight unmarked and unhurt. He deserves praise for strategy, that is, finding a way within the framework of the rules that were laid out to win a match that all but his best friends thought he was going to lose. But he didn't pick up a lot of fans in doing so, but noted that the fans who were complaining weren't locked in looking eye to eye with Shamrock. He recognizes it 2 weeks before his 38th birthday, that his long-term future is really in the world of Japanese pro wrestling and not UFC. Because of Shamrock's visibility and stature in Japan and the fact Japanese fans and press were seeing it as a battle between the toughest guy in New Japan, the most successful and biggest wrestling company in Japan, and the toughest guy in Pancrase, whose audience believes it is the only true competitive pro wrestling, combined with future UFC paydays from being Superfight champion as opposed to someone having lost 2 title shots. This was the most important competitive match of his life. 5 years from now, and for that matter 5 weeks from now when he's in the ring in Japan, people will have long forgotten how boring his most important victory was, only that he was the first Ultimate champion and had avenged his loss to Shamrock. Shamrock, who was announced at 215 but appeared to be slightly lighter, as he was as cut up as usual, but not as large as in his 3 previous super fights, was despondent over how everything turned out since the loss was a major blow to his reputation both here and abroad. He said it was a fair decision. There were those who felt that had it been a tournament fight, Severn should have gotten the decision, but in a championship match, Severn didn't initiate enough offense to get the decision. The vast majority calling here believed the right person got the decision. He said the rule changed by the judge which changed his strategy and the broken nose he suffered a few weeks ago in training which was largely kept secretive were not factors at all in the final outcome. He was particularly down about his own performance because he had Severn exactly where he wanted him, in the mount, and was unable to finish him or even do any serious damage. The only complaint he made after the match is with the rules allowing gloves on competitors, saying that the stitching in Severn's glove when Severn was mauling him opened him up. It was only moments after Severn reversed and got on top before Shamrock had several open cuts and had a face covered in blood, and at one point the doctor had to examine him to determine if he could continue. Although Shamrock looked in bad shape at the time, and after the fight as well with the puffy eyes and fresh cuts, the wounds were all superficial. Because UFC tries to bill itself as being as close to a street fight as possible, he pointed out that in a street fight, you wear shoes and can kick with them, which is banned in UFC, but in a street fight, you don't go into it wearing gloves. The most bitter pill to swallow was an apparent self-realization about his own hunger and being spread too thin between training for UFC and Pancrase, which are similar but different entities and require different training and booking fighters, running his dojo, getting into acting and raising a family that is soon to add a 4th child. He said he didn't have the training drive he's had in the past and doesn't have the hunger that he sees in his own younger fighters. He talked about first going on a vacation, then undergoing surgery to straighten his nose and fix his knee, and then being around while his wife has a baby in July. His next few matches will be with Pancrase, but he said he's made the decision to retire as a fighter with Pancrase in December when his contract expires. Shamrock said he understands the fans' reaction to the fight, and that as fans they have the right to vocally show their displeasure. Severn noted that because he and Shamrock are both pro wrestlers, that he actually felt a weird bond between the two of them, and at one point while he was on the bottom cracked a joke about what a tough way this is to earn a buck. What led to the match turning out as it did was understandable. 2 men, both with large families, having made big money for the first time in their lives and with a hell of a lot to lose with a devastating loss, totally respecting the fact that the other could put them away with one error. Severn studied the film of his prior match with Shamrock for the past several weeks after never watching a copy of the tape up until that time, and noticed Shamrock is mainly a counter fighter, so he didn't give him anything to counter. Severn noted that after his match with Shamrock last year that it was 2 weeks before he could even swallow food without a lot of pain from the guillotine choke finisher. Shamrock said that he couldn't put himself in a position where he could get hurt. Unfortunately, there is pure sport and there is entertainment. As soon as the word professional becomes a part of any sport, it inherently becomes business and can no longer be pure sport, no matter how much its most hardcore fan base wishes that were the case. While some martial experts categorize the match as a strategic masterpiece by Severn, 99.9% of the audience saw it as a terrible match. The only reason the show was saved was because of Fry, Vittetti, and Schultz. A main event with this much hype in a fledgling sport can't turn out like this again. It was a few years before pro wrestling in Japan recovered from Ali Inoki after it was hyped as the biggest sports event in the country and turned out so miserably. Ironically now, 20 years later, Inoki considers it his greatest fight because it was one of only a handful that were real, and it was against a dangerous adversary and he was limited in what he could do to survive by the rules even though it was in many ways similar to this match, minus the last 6 minutes of regulation time. Damage from this fight will probably be minimal if at all due to the strength of the undercard, but if there is another main event that is similar after this match and Ruiz Toktarov, the damage will be serious. The answer: similar to amateur wrestling when it comes to a stalling rule and how rules were changed decades ago in basketball to eliminate stalling with a shot clock. My suggestion is to implement a card system, similar to soccer and amateur wrestling, and give the ref power to issue stalling warnings if the men are on their feet and avoiding contact. After 2 warnings, which would be yellow cards, if a competitor continues to stall, he would get a red card, which would end the match and cause a loss. There may be an avoidance of action for a few minutes during a match, but at least it won't ever last 16 minutes again. Steve Nelmark, 1-0, beat Ty Bowden, 0-1, in 8:20 when the ref stopped the match. Nelmark got on top and Bowden bled within the first minute. Nelmark dominated with punches and elbows before the blood was so bad the match was stopped. 1. Cal Worsham, 1-1, beat Zane Frazier, 0-2 in 3:17 when Worsham scored a takedown and delivered several headbutts and punches from the top before Frazier tapped out. Frazier was also cut. Ironically, Worsham, who had the advantage the entire match, came out as the most seriously hurt person on the show and perhaps the worst in UFC history, as he had to spend the night in a hospital. He had polyps in his lung, probably congenital, which burst after taking a short punch that actually had no effect on the fight, but his lungs filled with fluid. While it wasn't life-threatening, they needed to insert a tube in his stomach to drain the fluid out of his lungs. He was okay by the next morning. 2. Rafael Carino, 1-0, beat Matt Anderson, 0-1. Carino is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter who recently won a national brown belt tournament but had never done a Vale Tudo/UFC style match before. Anderson was from the same Omaha dojo that produced Steve Jenham. Carino was billed at 6'8", 250, but was more like 6'4", 235 as compared to Anderson, who appeared to be 6'1", 210. Carino got on top, threw a lot of punches, Anderson bled a little, and finally the ref stopped the fight at 5:33. 3. Schultz, 1-0, beat Gary Goodridge, 2-2. Schultz, at 5'10", 203 with a shaved head and muscular build, looked a lot like the wrestler Conan. Goodridge is a powerhouse who eschewed all weight training to concentrate on his endurance training. Schultz scored several takedowns and mauled Goodridge from the top, bloodying him up. After the 12-minute regulation time ended, Goodridge's cut was checked by the doctor and the ref, and they refused to allow him to go into overtime. Schultz praised his late brother after the match. 4. Mark Hall, 3-1, beat Koji Kiao, 0-1, in a fluke. Kiao's corner man was pro wrestler Koki Kitahara from the War promotion. Hall got a punch which appeared to break Kiao's nose because it was like his nose exploded with blood everywhere. Kiao slammed Hall down and had him in a bad position when the ref saw all the blood and pulled Kiao off. Kiao didn't seem like he wanted to continue, and when the doctor checked the nose, he thought it was broken. As it turns out, reports we get were that it actually wasn't broken, and stopped the fight in 47. Hall got a huge ovation from the pro wrestling type crowd that hated foreigners and liked the idea of a 189-pound American beating a 390-pound Japanese giant. Hall asked his girlfriend to marry him on TV after the match. In next-day Japanese newspaper reports, they said Hall should have been disqualified since closed fist punches were against the rules and Kiao's nose was broken by an illegal punch. 5. Fry, 4-0, beat Bidetti, 0-1, in a total war. Fry took the game Bidetti apart with punches, knees and elbows, both standing and on the ground. Bidetti was covered in blood but refused to quit. Bidetti was the real deal, and this result was a major upset. After the show, even the Brazilians were praising what an awesome fighter Fry was. The match probably lasted too long because, as brutal as it looked on television, it was far more brutal live. The ref didn't want to stop it because Bidetti never quit fighting and has a tremendous reputation. Finally, at 9:30, the ref stopped the match. 6. Severn, 9-2, beat Shamrock, 5-2, by a 2-1 decision after the two finished 24 minutes of regulation and 2 3-minute overtimes. The first 16 minutes was largely dancing, although there were a few blows thrown and Shamrock was cut by the 6-minute mark. Severn finally shot for Severn's ankle at 16 minutes, but Shamrock quickly got out of trouble. He tried for the ankle again at 17:30, and this time it wound up in a scramble with Shamrock on top in the mounted position. Shamrock tried to get rough on top, with a few elbows and a lot of body shots and rubbing the forearm bone against the cheekbone. Severn exposed his back and Shamrock went for the choke, but Shamrock didn't get the move and Severn managed a reversal landing on top. Severn threw punches and elbows at Shamrock and bloodied him up, opening up cuts on both the top and bottom of the left eye and the bottom of the right. Shamrock escaped just as regulation time ended. There was no action to speak of in either overtime. In total, Shamrock controlled about 4:30 and Severn controlled about 1:15. But in his short period in control, Severn did 5 times the damage, which is why he was awarded the decision. As coincidence would have it, Hoist Gracie was also in Denver over the weekend doing a seminar. Gracie's name was kept alive on the show even though it's doubtful he'll ever take a fight against a top all-around fighter again. There were plenty of signs and banners wanting Gracie to get a shot at might for him to return to UFC. At the end of the show, Severn's team had a banner of its own, challenging Gracie to a match at UFC 10, with a drawing of a chicken asking if Gracie was chicken. The next day at his seminar in Detroit, Gracie, who didn't attend the UFC nor stay in the same hotel where the fighters from all over the world had congregated, was downing both Severn and Shamrock big time. Among the pro wrestling types at the show were Coleman, Kitahara, Wally Yamaguchi, manager Mr. Toyota, and Pancrase wrestlers Frank Shamrock, Jason DeLucia, Masakatsu Funaki, who was Shamrock's second for the match with Severn, Guy Mesger and Vernon White. I expect that Fry, who is a big fan of Ric Flair's, will eventually become a pro wrestler in Japan and perhaps a tag team partner of Severn's. The final appearances of Diesel and Razor Ramon in the WWF came in a strange curtain call finale of the clique before the first indoor non-pay-per-view house in WWF history to top $300,000 on May 19 in Madison Square Garden. The Garden's second straight sellout, the first time that's happened in 11 years, of 18,800 fans, 16,564 paying $319,411, saw what many were saying was the best MSG house show since WrestleMania 10. The big news on the show was supposed to be the tag team title change where the Godwin brothers, Mark Canterbury and Dennis Knight, won the belts from the Body Donnas, Chris Candido and Tom Pritchard. That happened with Phineas Knight recovering from being kissed by Sonny to score the pin on Zip with a slop drop. While that happened, and results in the Godwins defending the tag team titles in the free-for-all match on the May 26 pay-per-view show from Florence, South Carolina against the Smoking Guns, it was hardly the main topic of conversation regarding the show. Eventually the belts are supposed to wind up going to Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith. Both Diesel and Ramon in their final appearances before starting with WCW in mid-June, were the recipients of chants of "You sold out and please don't go" by a decent percentage of the crowd that seemed to know it was their final show. Ramon was booed in his match with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who replaced Goldust, who missed another weekend because his knee hasn't recovered well enough for him to work, and heavily booed with a loud "You sold out" chant after he did the job. After the match, he grabbed the house mic and before he could get more than a few words out, panicked WWF officials, since this wasn't part of the show, cut off the power. As it was, all Ramon ended up saying was something to the effect of telling people to say goodbye to the bad guy. However, it wasn't over for the bad guy just yet. After a very strong main event cage match where Shawn Michaels beat Diesel to keep the WWF title, it was time for the curtain call. Michaels had won the match by walking out the cage after laying Diesel out with a superkick. After the match, Michaels kissed Diesel, who revived like the frog kissed by the princess, and the two hugged in the ring. Diesel got a lot more cheers during the match than most would have figured, although Michaels was still the most popular wrestler on the show. Ramon and fellow clique member Helmsley then came into the ring and the four got on all four posts and gave clique signals to the fans, some of whom were teary-eyed and saying it was one of the best moments of wrestling at MSG in years. Supposedly this final display wasn't approved by WWF officials, but it got over great with the audience, so little will probably result from it. However, there were other wrestlers who were very unhappy at what they considered a kayfabe violation, particularly since Helmsley was in the ring hugging Ramon and Diesel had just finished a match with Michaels and magically arose from a finishing move by being kissed. The other clique member, 123 Kid, wasn't at the show as his future with the company is somewhat in question after he showed up at the Superstars taping on April 30th in no condition to perform, and won't be back until June at the earliest. The MSG show climaxed a four-show tour which drew $664,192. While there have been numerous larger crowds, in fact most crowds at MSG during the 80s were larger, this was the largest non-pay-per-view gate ever, breaking the $299,526 record set at the previous show in March. The previous afternoon, Philadelphia drew its largest non-pay-per-view house since 1992 when 8,308 fans paid $158,402. Hershey that night drew 4,783 and $80,410, its best non-pay-per-view house since 1991. The tour opened on May 17 in Baltimore at the arena drawing 6,559 fans and $106,329, its best non-pay-per-view gate since 1989. Perhaps the most impressive stat of all is that they did $251,000 additionally in merchandise at the four shows, including $111,000 in Madison Square Garden. They averaged close to $7 per head in merchandise over the weekend, which is close to double what you would expect, which shows that the characters on top that they are merchandising are very over. With the exception of Hershey, all the shows were headlined by Michaels beating Diesel in cage matches. Davey Boy Smith attempted to interfere in all the matches, but they were teases of title change finishes. Diesel refused to work Hershey after he was originally booked in the main event, saying he wasn't going to do a double shot, so Smith worked that show against Michaels. Juice was flowing in Detroit at UFC, and another kind of juice, and I don't mean pineapple juice, appears to be flowing at WCW. Lethal Lottery has never been a strong concept in the past. If it ever could be a strong concept, this was the year, with the gimmick of pitting Road Warrior versus Road Warrior, Steiner versus Steiner, and pairing Ric Flair and Randy Savage as a team. But whatever was good about the Slamboree pay-per-view was, with the exception of Flair and Savage, were the two non-lottery title matches. Another WCW filled with negative feedback took place on May 19 at the Baton Rouge, Louisiana Riverside Centerplex, before 7,791 fans, 6,308 paying $104,760. It was announced several times on both the pay-per-view show and on Nitro the following evening as a sellout. It was nearly full, but a sellout it wasn't. Nor a good show. I'm apparently becoming too charitable as I gave it a slight thumbs down because I enjoyed Flair's performance and both the US and WCW title matches, and in other spots the work rate was better than expected. Overall the lottery was a dud, with Diamond Dallas Page winning the Battle Royal, but not getting the promised title shot as it was announced on TV the next day that his foot hit the floor earlier in the Battle Royal. How Lex Luger would get the title shot instead of the Barbarian was not explained, nor need it be, since this is WCW and it's time to get used to the idea that much of the fun was seeing how they can't keep anything logical or keep storylines straight. American males Mark Bagwell and Scott Untall beat Shark, John Tena and Max, formerly Max Muscle, although announcer Eric Bischoff wasn't told that he's been given a new name with his new look, unfortunately same old working ability, so he continued to call him his old name in 237 when Max knocked Shark down by accident and Riggs pinned him. After the match, Shark turned on Max and then went after Jimmy Hart. The Giant came down and choke-slammed Shark. Dud. 1. Road Warrior Animal Joe Laurinaitis and Booker T. Booker Huffman went to a double countout with Road Warrior Hawk, Mike Hegstrand, and Lex Luger, Larry Fole, in 6:54 to eliminate all four from Battle Bowl. Hawk suffered a broken foot in Japan at the April 29 Tokyo Dome and came to Baton Rouge with an orthopedic shoe and couldn't work. He never tagged in, which meant Luger worked the entire match. It was real bad. The only good stuff was a break dance and kick by T. Finally Lex and Hawk broke up, and Animal and T broke up, and the Road Warriors brawled together against their foes and were all counted out. 1/4 of 1 star. 2. Public Enemy, Ted Petty and Mike Durham, beat Chris Benoit and Kevin Sullivan in 4:44. At one point Benoit saved Sullivan. Later, when it came time for Sullivan to save Benoit, he just walked away, pretending to have hurt his knee and leaving Benoit to get the Public Enemy sandwich through the table, and he was pinned by Rocco. A little sloppy, but overall not bad. 1 3/4 stars. 3. Rick Steiner, Robert Reach Steiner, and Booty Man, Ed Leslie, beat Craig Pittman and Scott Reach Steiner, in 8:21 when Rick pinned Pittman with a German suplex. At least Rick and Scott worked against each other for a few minutes, getting lots of heat and trading big suplexes. The fans booed when Booty tagged in. 2 1/4 stars. 4. BK Wall Street, Lawrence Rotunda, and Jim Duggan beat Steve Regal, Darren Matthews, and David Taylor in 3:46 when Duggan taped his fist and punched Taylor. Duggan was over more than just about anyone on the show because Baton Rouge was his old stomping ground, literally going back 10 years. The sad part is that it showed the only guys over on the show were from 8 to 10 years ago, which shows how effective the WCW announcers have been at creating stars. Duggan is just awful. Dud. 5. Dick Slater and Bobby Eaton beat Disco Inferno, Glenn Gilberti, and Alex Wright in 2:56 when Slater hit Disco with his cowboy boot as Disco was dancing, and then pinned him. No heat at all. Disco looked bad trying to work as a face. -1 star. 6. Diamond Dallas Page, Paige Falkenberg, and Barbarian, Sanvelahi beat Mang, Yuli Fifida, and Hugh Morris, Bill DeMott, in 5:15 when Barbarian pinned Morris after a boot to the face. At the same time Mang had Page pinned, but the announcer said it didn't count since Page had his foot under the ropes. It also didn't count because neither were legal men in the ring. Better than you'd think, particularly Mang versus Barbarian was pretty stiff. 1 1/2 star. 7. Scott Norton and Ice Train, Harold Hogue, beat Big Bubba, Ray Traylor, and Stevie Ray, Lane Huffman, in 3:32 when Bubba and Ray collided, and Norton and Train gave Bubba a double shoulder block and pinned him. Ray looked especially bad. What else is new? Norton didn't look good either. -1 star. 8. Ric Flair, Richard Fliehr, and Randy Savage, Randy Poffo, beat Eddie Guerrero and Arnold Anderson, Marty Lunda, in 4:04 of a wild brawl. Flair and Anderson worked together much of the way, beating on Savage. Guerrero saved Savage from Flair and Guerrero started working together, which got great heat. As Guerrero took over on Flair, Savage recovered and attacked Flair. Anderson then DDT'd his own partner and posted Savage, and Flair pinned Guerrero. Flair and Anderson held Savage and Elizabeth slapped him in the face. Anderson then DDT'd Savage on the floor and Flair stomped on him. 3¼ stars. They had an ad for the Great American Bash pay-per-view on June 16. They had a brief clip of Hogan, which is highly misleading since he's not on the card, during the ad that'll appear on the Barker channel. Since the opener was a double count out, and did a fake drawing and announced Norton and Ice Train got a second round bye and were in the Battle Royal. 9. Dean Malenko, Dean Simon, pinned Brad Armstrong, Robert James Jr., to retain the WCW Cruiserweight title. No heat at all. Obviously, technically it was good. Fans treated the match as if it were intermission. They've already killed the Cruiserweight title by putting over the idea of Armstrong being a contender for the belt. Malenko won using a stomach block while standing on the middle rope at 8:29. 2½ stars. 10. Slater and Eaton beat Duggan and Wall Street in 4:08 when Eaton schoolboyed Wall Street after Duggan punched his partner. Worst match on the show. -1 star. 11. Public Enemy was awarded a forfeit win over Flair and Savage when security had to keep the two of them apart before they could even make it to the ring. 12. Page and Barbarian beat Booty Man and Rick Steiner when Barbarian pinned Booty after Page dropped an elbow on him in 5:05. 1/2 star. 13. Conan Charles Ashenoff retained the U.S. title, pinning Jushin Liger, Keiichi Yamada, in 9:30. Liger came out with Sonny Ono. Mike Tenay got to announce this match, and he pretty much did more to get new guys over than all the other announcers in the company have done with all the new wrestlers in the last 6 months combined. Liger hit a plancha when Conan went after Ono. Good mat work early followed by all kinds of big moves and near falls. After Liger came off the top, Conan got his foot up. Conan then put him away with a splash mountain, which he called a power drop. Very good match, easily the best on the show, and it wasn't as if it was all Liger's doing. 3½ stars. Flair, Anderson, Woman, and Liz came out for an interview. Steve McMichael came out and Flair issued the challenge to him and a partner. Flair was incredible, but the idea of Kevin Green being the mystery partner didn't get over well. First, everyone knew it since it's been in the news and they've talked about it on Nitro. Second, during the main event show, Bischoff said that McMichael and Green would both be on the pay-per-view. McMichael has tremendous presence, and if he can learn to work a little bit, can be a star in pro wrestling, although long-term he needs to be a heel. The segment lost a lot when Green showed up. 14. Page won the 8-man Battle Royal. The first 6 minutes were among the worst Battle Royals I've seen. No heat and nobody except Page had any idea what they were doing. Once it came down to Page and Barbarian, the final 3:30 was very good with big moves and near falls going back and forth until Page got the pin with the diamond cutter. Even though the finish was strong, there was no crowd reaction because nobody cared about these guys, even with all the TV time devoted to Page's angles. 1½ star. 15. The Giant Paul White pinned Sting, Steve Borden, to retain the WCW title in 10:41. This had great crowd heat and excellent psychology. At one point Giant went to choke slam Sting through a table, but Luger put Jimmy Hart, who he was handcuffed to, on the table and Giant had to let Sting go. At another point, Luger pulled Sting out of the way when Giant went for a drop kick. When was the last time you saw a 6'10" guy do that? Ref Randy Anderson took a bump and Sting made a comeback. As Giant went after Luger, Sting hit him with 3 Stinger splashes, but Giant didn't sell it hardly at all. Sting used a splash off the top, but Giant kicked out and Sting landed on the ref again. Sting did a second splash off the top and put Giant in the Scorpion. Hart tried to interfere, but Luger grabbed the megaphone. As they fought over the megaphone, it accidentally hit Sting in the head and Giant got up and choke slammed him for the pin. Good storyline and better action than you'd have any right to expect given Giant's level of experience and that Sting has never been known to carry people well. 3¼ stars. That wasn't the only other pay-per-view of this past week. Nor was UFC the only pay-per-view of the week where a Shamrock lost a world title. The second Pancrase pay-per-view, The Brawl in Budokan, was taped on May 16 in Tokyo's Budokan Hall before a crowd announced at 12,800 fans. The show will air in the United States on June 14. In the main event, Bas Rutten of Netherlands became the first two-time King of Pancrase champion, beating Frank Shamrock in 11:11 when the referee stopped the match due to blood coming from dangerously close to Shamrock's left eye. Shamrock apparently took a knee to the eye, which swelled shut, and he was taking a lot of punishment on the left side as he couldn't see the blows coming. This was reported as a great Pancrase-style match which was almost as wild as a UFC match. Shamrock, who was at UFC, had no complaints about the referee stopping the fight. In other results, 1. Yuki Kondo went to a 10-minute draw with Kunyoku Kyuma with no lost points. 2 judges voted the match a draw while the other gave it to Kyuma, so it was a majority draw decision. 2. Yoshiki Takahashi was awarded a unanimous decision over Takafumi Ito after the two went the 10-minute time limit with no lost points. 3. Sammy Schlitt, a gigantic newcomer from Holland who impressed everyone, destroyed Manabu Yamada in 5:44 with a choke sleeper. Schlitt got Yamada in 2 submissions before the finish, with Yamada having to get rope breaks to save himself. Being that Yamada is one of the best of the Japanese and it was Schlitt's debut, everyone was put on notice. Depending on how late in the night it got and how many drinks the person you talked with had, Schlitt's height was anywhere from 6'9" to 7'3". 4. Takaku Fuke and Vernon White went to a 10-minute draw with all 3 judges having it even, and no lost points during the match. 5. Ryushi Yanagisawa scored a major upset over UFC star Oleg Toktarov in his pro wrestling debut. The two went 15 minutes with Yanagisawa getting the win because Toktarov was given a red card, resulting in a lost point, for sticking his finger in Yanagisawa's Adam's apple, which is illegal under Pancrase rules. The word we got is that Toktarov came into the match out of shape as he didn't train hard enough and didn't understand how all the Pancrase fighters were high-level guys and always in great shape. Toktarov didn't get over, but the two were said to have beaten pretty hard on each other. 6. Jason DeLucia beat Asami Shibuya after the 15-minute time limit expired on lost points. 7. Masakatsu Funaki beat August Smile, a pro wrestler from Austria and former Greco-Roman star, in 2:01 with a choke sleeper. 8. Guy Mesger upset Minoru Suzuki in 7:59 when Mesger knocked Suzuki down with a kick and the ref looked at Suzuki's eyes and Major events wrestling calendar May 24 to June 24. May 24 All Japan Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, Misawa vs. Tao. May 25 Rings at Ekaterinburg, Russia. Yamamoto vs. Ramaji. May 26 WWF In Your House pay-per-view Florence, South Carolina Civic Center, Michaels vs. Smith. May 27 UWFI New Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall, Takada vs. Fujiwara. May 27 WWF Monday Night Raw tapings Fayetteville, North Carolina Cumberland County Memorial Auditorium, Michaels vs. Goldust. May 27 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Macon, Georgia Coliseum. May 28 WWF Superstars tapings North Charleston, South Carolina Coliseum, Michaels vs. Goldust. June 1 World Wrestling Peace Festival Los Angeles Sports Arena, Inoki and Severin vs. Fujiwara and Toktarov. June 1 ECW Philadelphia ECW Arena, Douglas vs. Scorpio. June 2 AAA Tijuana, Norte California Auditorium Municipal. June 3 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Asheville, North Carolina Civic Center. June 7 All Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall. June 7 WCW Legends at the Odd Buffalo, New York War Memorial Auditorium, Giant vs. Sting. June 7 UWFI Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, Takada vs. Arashi. June 9 WWF Chicago Rosemont Horizon, Michaels vs. Goldust. June 10 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Wheeling, West Virginia Civic Center. June 11 New Japan Hiroshima Sun Plaza Auditorium, Hashimoto vs. June 12 New Japan Top of Super Junior Tournament Finals Osaka Furitsu Gym. June 14 Pancrase Brawl in Budokan pay-per-view taped May 16 in Tokyo, Frank Shamrock vs. Rutten. June 15 AAA Triple Mania 4B Orizaba, Veracruz. June 16 WCW Great American Bash pay-per-view Baltimore Arena, Giant vs. Luger. June 17 New Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall Sasuke vs. Black Tiger. June 17 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Richmond, Virginia Memorial Auditorium. June 22 ECW Philadelphia ECW Arena. June 23 WWF King of the Ring pay-per-view Milwaukee, Wisconsin Mecca Arena. June 24 WWF Monday Night Raw tapings Green Bay, Wisconsin Brown County Coliseum. June 24 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Charlotte, North Carolina Independence Arena. Results. May 8th Lalne Pontla, AAA, Baby Rabbit and Pantrita B Espectritos 1 and 2, Super Muñeco and Torero and El Mexicano and Blue Demon Jr. B Ice Killer and Chicano Power and Gamma and Espectro Tony Arce and Vulcano and Rocco Valente B Angel Mortal and Mr. Condor and Marabunta, Conan and La Parca B Fishman and CN Chorus. May 9th Erie, Pennsylvania WWF, 2403, Bob Holly B Brooklyn Brawler, Smoking Guns B Gangstas in Paradise, Justin Bradshaw B Barry Horowitz, Mr. Perfect Ref, Jerry Lawler B Razor Ramon Mark Marrow B Mankind DQ, WWF Tag Titles, Bodidonas B Godwins, Ultimate Warrior B Vader. May 10th Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Vilanito and Damian Cito B Orito and Saigoncito Dragon, Mr. Niebla and Olympico and Filoso B Alcon Negro Jr. and Reyes Velos and Escudero Rojo, Archangel and Guerrero de la Muerte and Mocho Cota B Brazo de Oro and El Brazo and Ringo Mendoza, Felino and El Satanico and Gran Marcus Jr. B Dandy and Lizmark and Brazo de Plata DQ, Hector Garza and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Vampiro Canadiense B Connect and Universo 2000 and Mascara Año 2000 DQ. May 10th McMinnville TN Hardcore Championship Wrestling, Prozac Jack B TNT, Troy Eaton B Quinton Charisma DQ, Larry Valentine B TNT, Kroll the Deathstalker B Chic, Jack and Tony Falk B Eaton and Kroll. May 11th West Allis, Wisconsin, Mid-American Wrestling, 414 Sellout, Simon Stiletto B Trevor Blanchard Dr. X, Tom Stone, B Big Daddy Dave DQ, Wave Rider Craig B Danny Dominion and Billy Wild, Barfly Mike B Axel Future, Billy Joe Eaton B Spymaster, Frankie DeFalco and Johnny Mercedes B Farmer Vic and Bouncer Bulinsky, DeFalco and Mercedes B Love Brothers. May 11th Emory, Virginia, Southern States Wrestling, Scott Sterling B Scotty McKeever, Bam Bam Christian and David Lynch B Intruder and Chic White, Mark Malibu B Battering Ram, Equalizer B Danny Christian, Alex Shane B Stormtrooper, Bo James B Tracy Smothers, Frank Jones and Roger Anderson B Bobby Fulton and Ricky Morton. May 11th Cleveland, Ohio, Cleveland All-Pro Wrestling, 175, Genshi B Briar Wellington, Bill Church B Natural Born Killer, Bone Crusher Broca B Canadian Bad Boy, Theater of Pain B Roadhog and Scott Stone, Executioner B Mr. Main Event, Jason Fabio B Rhino Richards, Pain and Agony B Brett Powers and Psycho Mike. May 11th Greenwood, South Carolina, Southern Championship Wrestling, 180 SWAT Steve Carlton B Stone Cold Kid Cruiser Lewis B Johnny Dollar, Wonderful Wayne B JW Steel DQ Freedom Fighter and JJ Justice B Nightmare and Mercenary, Max Miles B Steel Desperado and Jake Mulligan B Ricky Regal and Mickey Free. May 11th Mount Vernon, Illinois, Independent Championship Wrestling, 440, Reno Riggins B Rip Rogers, Little King B Red Baron, Madman Pondo, Kevin Connolly DDQ Ian Rotten, Jeff Rocket and TJ Powers B Thunderbolt Baxton and Johnny Walker, California Kid, Scott Little, B Chic, George Weingeroff May 12th, Binghamton, New York, WWF, 3278, Justin Bradshaw B Barry Horowitz 1/2 of 1 star, Mark Marrow B Brooklyn Brawler 1 star, Smoking Guns B Gangstas in Paradise 1 1/2 star, WWF Tag Titles, Bodidonas B Godwins 2 stars, Mankind B Jake Roberts 1 star, Mr. Perfect Ref, Jerry Lawler B Razor Ramon 3 stars, Ultimate Warrior B Vader 1 star. May 12th Vancouver, Washington, Championship Wrestling USA, John Rambo B Bill Sawyer, Bodyguard B Sawyer, Lou Andrews B Bruiser Bryan, Dane Rush B Richie Magnat, Summito B Buddy Wayne, Colonel DeBeers B Bart Sawyer, Jesse Barr vs. Matt Bourne. May 12th Princetown, West Virginia, Southern States Wrestling, Scott Sterling B Scotty McKeever, David Lynch B Danny Christian, Bubba B Jim Studd, Equalizer B Tim Blaze Core, Roger Anderson and Frank Parker B Tracy Smothers and Dan Cooley, Ricky Morton and Jimmy Valiant B Bo James and War Machine. May 13th Lawton Hookay, Power Zone Wrestling Alliance, Casey Cannon B Psycho, Oklahoma Kid B Jeff Knight, TNT B Doink, Tom Jones Kershawn Summers, Texas Playboys B Slash and Kincaid. May 14th Tokyo Korakuen Hall, JWP, 1600 Korakuen Hall Tag Titles, Tomoko Kuzumi and Yuki Miyazaki B Hiromi Yagi and Hashimoto, Rieko Amano B Commando Bolshoi, Devil Masami and Fuseo Naochi and Saburo B Cutie Suzuki and Kanako Matoya and Tomoko Kuzumi, Candy Akutsu and Hikari Fukuoka B Tomoko Miyaguchi and Dynamite Kansai, Old Style Street Fight Deathmatch, Mayumi Ozaki B Takako Inoue 3510. May 14th Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, CMLL Welterweight Tourney Group B Karloff Lagarde Jr. B Ultraman Jr., Ciclone Ramirez B. Yone Jinjan, Felino B. Alacron, Angel Azteca B. Zumbido, Ramirez B. Lagarde, Felino B. Azteca, Felino B. Ramirez to win Group B. May 14, Greenville, South Carolina, Southern Championship Wrestling, 102. SWAT B. Rick Michaels, Butcher Blackwell and Cruiser Lewis B. Ricky Regal and Mickey Free, J.J. Justice B. Nightmare, Steve Anderson B. Wonderful Wayne, Max Miles B. Johnny Dollar, Desperado and Jake Mulligan B. Anderson and Freedom Fighter. May 15, Montgomery, Alabama, WCW Saturday Night Tapings 2085 with 1,300 paid, Sting B. Meng, Jushin Liger B. Steve Dahl, Kevin Sullivan and Chris Benoit B. Mike Painter and Rick Fargo, Diamond Dallas Page B. Billy Kidman, Barbarian B. Jim Duggan DQ. Rick and Scott Steiner B. American Males, Booty Man B. Gambler, Harlem Heat B. Men at Work, Mark Starr and Mike Winner, Sting B. Steve Regal. May 15, now call upon AAA, Mexican Cruiserweight title, Carlos La Momia B. Blue Demon Jr. to win title, Octagon and Pantera and Ultimo Dragon B. Jerry Estrada and Psicosis and Heavy Metal, Killer and Jason the Terrible and Pierroth Jr. B. Conan and Pero Aguayo and La Parca. May 15, Agashi Murayama, All Japan Women, Saya Endo B. Yoshiko Tamura, Yuka Shinobi Yumi Fukawa, Tomoko Watanabe B. Tanny Mouth, Tashio Yamada and Itsuko Mita and Genki Misae B. Manami Toyota and Kaoru Ito and Aritamada, Asia Kong B. Mariko Yoshida, Kyoko Inoue and Kumiko Makawa B. Yumiko Hata and Shaparita Asari. May 16, Yukaichi, All Japan Women, 1,850 Yoshiko Tamura B. Yukashina, Genki Misai B. Yumi Fukawa, Atsuko Mita B. Tanny Mouth and Saya Endo, Yumiko Hata and Mima Shimoda and Kumiko Makawa B. Asia Kong and Tashio Yamada and Rita Mata, Kaoru Ito B. Shaparita Asari, Manami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida B. Tomoko Watanabe and Asia Kong. May 16, Bristol, England. Brian Dixon Promotions, Johnny St. B. Steve Gray, Hanzo Nakajima B. Mal Flanders, Steve Casey B. Marty Jones DQ, St. B. Nakajima, Ladder Match, Danny Collins B. Pete Collins. May 16, Shelbyville, Tennessee, All-State Wrestling, Brawler Rex B. Brawler Mark, Ashley Hudson B. Tony Falk, Kid Sensation B. Corey Williams, Keith and Ken Arden DDQ Ben and Glenn Mullins, Yoshi Kwan B. Larry Valentine. May 16, Bakersfield, Slammers, Tyrone Little B. Pete Malloy, Samoan Kid and Hombre de Oro B. Dynamite D. and Little, Bruce Bodine B. Jesus Zapata, Movie star Mike B. Bodine, Jeff Lindbergh B. El Toro Bravo. May 17, Baltimore, WWF, 6,559, Bushwhackers B. New Rockers, Justin Bradshaw B. Bob Holly, Sabio Vega B. Mike Corey, Ahmed Johnson B. Davey Boy Smith DQ, Steve Austin B. Jake Roberts, Ultimate Warrior B. Owen Hart, Vader B. Yokozuna, WWF Tag Titles, Body Donnas B. Godwins, Hunter Hurst Helmsley B. Razor Ramon, Cage Match for WWF Title, Shawn Michaels B. Diesel. May 17, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, All Japan, 2,100 Sellout, Tsuyoshi Kikuchi B. Tommy Rogers The Lacrosse, Jim Steele B. Bobby Fulton, Dan Crawford and Doug Furnace B. Takao Mori and Masao Inoue, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momoto B. Mighty Inoue and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi, Giant Kimala 2 B. Ryukaku Izumida, Kena Kobashi B. Manukia Mossman, Steve Williams and Johnny Ace and the Patriot B. Tamun Honda and Gary Albright and Toshiaki Kawada, Mitsuharu Misawa and Jun Akiyama and Satoru Asako B. Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa and Kentaro Shiga. May 17, Glen Olden, Pennsylvania, ECW, 250, Rob Van Dam B. El Puerto Rican 1 1/2 star, Big Titan B. Hack Myers 1 star, Taz B. Axel Rotten 1 1/2 star, Pitbull No. 2 B. Bubba Ray Dudley DQ 2 stars, ECW title, Raven B. Mikey Whipwreck 2 stars, John Cronus B. Mustafa 1 star, New Jack B. Perry Saturn Dud 2 Cold Scorpio B. Chris Jericho 3 1/4 stars, Falls Count Anywhere, Brian Lee B. Tommy Dreamer. May 17, Nesawal Coyote AAA, One Night Tag Tourney, Jason the Terrible and Payaso Coco Azul B. Super Colo and Alcon Dorado Jr., La Parca and Mascara Sagrada Jr. B. Payaso Coco Amarillo and Caras La Momia, Pierroth Jr. and Cien Caras B. Pantera and El Hijo del Huracan Ramirez, Octagon and Nuevo Huracan Ramirez Jr. B. Payaso Coco Rojo and Killer, Parca and Sagrada Jr. B. Jason and Azul, Pierroth and Caras B. Octagon and Ramirez Jr., Parca and Sagrada Jr. B. Caras and Pierroth to win tournament. May 17, Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Villainito and Guerrero del Futuro B. Ciclanchito Ramirez and Orito, Guerrero Maya and Guerrero del Futuro and Damian El Guerrero B. Sky and Olympus and Atlantico, Mascara Magica and Ringo Mendoza and La Fiera B. Guerrero de la Muerte and Mocho Cota and Bestia Salvaje DQ. Atlantis and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Brazo de Plata B. Apollo Dantes and El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. DQ, Dandy B. Felino. May 17, Osaka Furitsu Gym 2, All Japan Women, 1880 Yuga Shinobi Yoshiko Tamura, Shinobi Yumi Fukawa, Kumiko Kawabi Saya Endo, Mimashimoto and Yumiko Harabi Tashio Yamada and Kaoru Ito, Kyoko Inoue and Tomoko Watanabe and Tanny Mouth B Tashio Yamada and Itsuko Mita and Genki Misae, Asia Kong and Shaparita Asari B Manami Toyota and Ri Tamada. May 17, Las Vegas, National Wrestling Conference, 500, Bobby Bradley Jr. B Little Haystacks, Wayne Bradley, Webster Slaughter B Johnny Payne DQ Tamatoa B Navajo Kid Damien AAA and D-Dog, AAA Pero Russo, B Superboy and Principe Indu, Larry Powers B Zuma, KGB DQ, Virgil B Honky Tonk Man, Sabu B Kama DQ. May 17, Waltham, Massachusetts, Atlantic Wrestling Federation, 175, Scott Taylor B Tim McNeely, Handicap Match, Bulldozer B Brian Walsh and Scott Sharkey, Steve Bradley DDQ Antoine Roy, Rick Fuller B King Kong Bundy Core Annihilators, Mike Hollow and DDQ Sledgehammers, Jimmy Snuka B Metal Maniac. May 17, Hoboken, New Jersey, Indiana, 150, Inferno Kid B Ace Darling, Johnny Rods B Johnny Valiant, Gino Caruso B Kodiak Bear, Tito Santana B Chic, Tommy Cairo B Damian Stone, King Kala B Johnny Gunn, Jim Powers B Devon Storm. May 17, Johnson City, Tennessee, Tennessee Championship Wrestling, J.C. Black B Stanley, Bubba B Alex Shane, TCB Man B Bo James, Scott Sterling B Eddie Bruiser, The Eagle, Jackie Fulton, B Vladimir Koloff, Ricky Morton and Dave Jericho B Battering Ram and Iron Man. May 17, Oklahoma City, Power Zone Wrestling Alliance, Oklahoma Kid NC Rock and Roll Cowboy, Billy Phoenix D Psycho, Casey Cannon B Psycho, Treach Phillips Jr. B Chris Taylor, TNT and Slash and Damian Kincaid Tom Jones and Chopper and Nightmare. May 17, Rome, Georgia, North Georgia Wrestling Association, Kid Ego B Nasty Critter, Superstar B Jason Valentine, Sam McGraw, Punisher B Bull Ladu, Ken Arden B Steve Lawler, Dusty Dotson and Scott Prater B Keith and John Arden. May 17, Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Outpatient B Dragon Master No. 2, Randy Watkins and Scott James B Dragon Master No. 1 and Terry Phoenix, New One Man Gang B Richie Dye, Rick Justice and Chuck Colt B Frankie Lee and Jimmy Sharp, Michael Collins B Risk Taylor. May 18, Philadelphia Core State Spectrum, WWF, 8308, Bushwhackers B New Rockers, Justin Bradshaw B Bob Holly, Savio Vega B Marty Jannetty, Hunter Hurst Helmsley B Razor Ramon, WWF Tag Titles, Body Donnas B Godwins, Ahmed Johnson B Davey Boy Smith DQ, Steve Austin B Jake Roberts, Bader B Yokozuna, Ultimate Warrior B Owen Hart, Cage Match for WWF Title, Shawn Michaels B Diesel. May 18, Allentown, Pennsylvania, ECW 1200, Rob Van Dam B El Puerto Ricano, Ryan Lee B Axel Rotten, Bruise Brothers B Pitbulls, ECW Title, Raven B Chris Jericho, JT Smith and Little Guido and Big Titan B Bubba Ray Dudley and D Von Dudley and Hack Myers, Taz B 2 Cold Scorpio, Sabu B Mikey Whipwreck, ECW TV Title Triangular Match, Shane Douglas over Tommy Dreamer and Scorpio, ECW Tag Titles, Eliminators B Gangstas. May 18, Tokyo Oda Ward Gymnasium, Women's Dream and Future Multi-Promotional Junior All-Stars, 4,800 Sellout, Chihiro Nakano and Meiki Numao, Gia, Bikeiko Aono and Sayuri Okino, LLPW Rieko Amano, JWP, B Bloody Phoenix, Yoshimoto Women's Graduation Tournament, Toshie Sato Gia, Hyaki Kanbayashi, FMW Genki Misae, AJW, Kyoko Ichiki, IWA, Misae B Sato to win tournament, Hiromi Yagi, JWP, and Kaori Nakayama, FMW, B Yumi Fukawa, AJW, and Kanako Matoya, JWP, Yukashina, AJW, B Yuki Miyazaki, JWP, Tomoko Miyaguchi, JWP, B Saya Endo, AJW All Japan Title, Yoshiko Tamura, AJW, B Tomoko Kuzumi, JWP, Kumiko Makawa and Tanny Mouth, AJW D Sonoko Kato and Chikeo Nagashima, Gia Sato and Kato and Nagashima B Makawa and Mouth and Misae. WWWA Super Lightweight Title Decide Match, Shaparita Asari, AJW, B Toshie Uematsu, Gia, Michiko Omukai, LLPW, and Shikako Shiratori, Yoshimoto, B. Ritamata, AJW, and Meiko Satomura, GM May 18, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, All Japan, 2,100 sellout. Mighty Inoue B. Masao Inoue, Yoshinari Ogawa and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi B. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton, Jun Akiyama B. Kentaro Shiga, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota B. Ryukaku Izumaya and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi, The Lacrosse and the Patriot and Johnny Ace B. Manukia Mossman and Doug Furness and Gary Albright, Steve Williams and Dan Crawford B. Mitsuharu Misawa and Satoru Asako, Kenta Kobashi and Tamon Honda and Giant Kimala 2B Akira Tao and Toshiaki Kawada and Takao Mori. May 18, Staten Island, New York, Universal Superstars of America, 450, Rhino Power No. 1 and No. 2 B. Mr. Puerto Rico and Kodiak Bear, Gino Caruso B. Golden Greek, Typhoon B. Virgil, Butch Cassidy B. Frank Burns, Typhoon B. Sunny Beach, L.A. Gore and AJ Steele B. Johnny Handsome and Christopher Michaels to win USA Tag titles, Bam Bam Bigelow B. Typhoon to win vacant USA title. May 18, Jefferson, North Carolina, Southern States Wrestling, 163, Scotty McKeever B. David Lynch, Danny and Bam Bam Christian B. Equalizer and Bubba, Roger Anderson and Frank Parker B. Steve Flynn and Alex Shane, Bo James B. Scott Sterling, The Patriot B. Vladimir Koloff, Ricky Morton B. Gorgeous George 3. May 18, Warren, Michigan, Motor City Wrestling 175, Skull Gans B. Mike Legacy DQ Rock Stevens B. Rob Avram, Killer Kennerek B. Bobby Clancy, Mike Kelly NC Death Dealer Otis Apollo B. Nighthawk DQ, Tommy Star B. Bobby Lee, Woody and Bobby Lee B. Scotty Summers and Johnny Paradise to win MCW Tag titles. May 18, Kimberly, Wisconsin, New Age Wrestling, Ninja Warrior B. Mike Medallion, Tony the Annihilator B. Illinois State Trooper, Steve Boz B. Brett Stryker, Texas Hangman B. Boner Steel and Bull Payne, Mr. Green Bay Mr. Dynamiac, Tony the Annihilator 1 Battle Royal. May 18, Wilmington, North Carolina, ICW, 350/Festival Show, David Blanchard B. Mark Ash, Victor Hayes B. David Gilbert, Felton Hayes 1 Battle Royal, Southern Express B. Blanchard and Gilbert, Ash B. Agent Steel. May 19, New York, Madison Square Garden, WWF, 18,800 sellout with 16,564 paid, Bushwhackers B. New Rockers, Justin Bradshaw B. Bob Holly, Savio Vega B. Bob Backlund, Ahmed Johnson B. Davey Boy Smith DQ, Steve Austin B. Jake Roberts, Austin B. Roberts, Ultimate Warrior B. Owen Hart, Vader B. Yokozuna WWF Tag Titles, Godwins B. Body Donas, Hunter Hurst Helmsley B. Razor Ramon, Cage Match for WWF Title, Shawn Michaels B. Diesel. May 19, Tokyo Shinagawa Station Circle, FMW 2000, Koji Nakagawa B. Nanjio Hayato, Hisakatsu Oya B. Hideki Hasaka, Bad Nurse Nakamura and Shark Tsuchiya B. Aki Kanbayashi and Megumi Kudo, The Gladiator B. Haido, Street Fight Mr. Pogo B. Ricky Fuji, Wing Kanemura B. Horace Boulder, World Street Fight 6-man titles, Headhunters and Super Leather B. Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Katsutoshi Niyama and Masato Tanaka. May 19, Asakiri, All Japan Women, 1,845, Saya Endo B. Yumi Fukawa, Genki Misae and Tashio Yamada B. Takako Inoue and Yoshiko Tamura, Kumiko Makawa and Kyoko Inoue and Mima Shimoda B. Shaparita Asari and Kaoru Ito and Manami Toyota, Mariko Yoshida B. Ritamata, Yumiko Hara and Itsuko Mita B. Tomoko Watanabe and Asia Kong. May 19, Alexandria, Virginia, Independent Pro Wrestling Alliance, 85, Big Slam Bader, Walter McDonald, B. Steve Corino, Gorgeous George 3B Rebel, Chuck Williams, Little Louie B. King Sleazy, Jimmy Cicero B. Doink the Clown, Mike Calla, Jim Neidhart B. Lucifer, Johnny Gunn and Corporal Punishment B. Jimmy Z and Q Ball Carmichael. May 20th, Monroe, Louisiana, WCW Monday Nitro tapings, 4,000 with 3,029 paid, Rick and Scott Steinerker Ice Train and Scott Norton, Ric Flair B. Eddie Guerrero, WCW Tag Titles, Sting and Lex Luger B. Meng and Barbarian, Diamond Dallas Page B. Brad Armstrong, WCW Title, Giant B. Arnold Anderson. Special thanks to Corey Van Cook, Buddy La Mancha, Buddy Powers, James Haas, Edie Bailey, Steve Grosso, Ken Doucet, Steve Prozik, Scott Hudson, Danny Deese, Dan Paris, Peggy Watkins, Bart Orkline, Faye Ferguson, Bill Henson, Georgianne Macropolis, Mark Taylor, Chris Boers, Ron Lemieux, Kurt Schneider, Walt Spafford, Mike Omansky, Rob Bruno, Tim Whitehead, Kevin Heilbronner, Marcus Watkins, Dominic Valenti, Jesse Money, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Dan Moreland. Japanese Television Rundown. May 6, New Japan. 1. Great Sasuke pinned Jushin Liger to win the IWGP Junior title in 1927. Sasuke's knee and whole body appears to be in bad shape as he looked in pain just jogging to the ring. Of course, if you understand his attitude, once the bell sounds he still goes out and does everything such as a majestic dive over the top without holding on with a full flip, and his Osai moonsault. It was about what you'd expect from these two, with them trading all the big moves toward the end for near falls. The Tokyo Dome is the worst building in the world for this kind of a match, and it wasn't quite as good as the two famous matches they had in 1994. But it was still a tremendous match. Sasuke used a Thunder Fire power bomb and a Tiger suplex to get the fall. 4.5 stars. 2. Shinya Hashimoto won the IWGP Heavyweight title from Nobuhiko Takada in 12:37. Another excellent match in a totally different way. This had the great crowd heat for almost every move, with the intensity and look of a real fight, with the psychology being that they kept teasing Takada using the cross armbreaker that he won the title with, and Hashimoto even used the figure 4 that Muto beat Takada with in their first meeting. Both traded hard kicks, with Hashimoto's kicks especially heavy. Finally, Hashimoto hit a DDT and used a brainbuster followed by a cross armbreaker to get the submission. The finish could have had more near falls and bout could have been longer by New Japan standards, but this had the more real feel that a match with Takada needs to keep him as something special. 4 stars. May 11th FMW Stadium Special. 1. Miguel Perez and Shoji Nakamaki and Toryu beat Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Haido and Hideki Hasaka in 13:18 when Matsunaga pinned Toryu with a Liger bomb. Really the only one of the 6 who can work is Perez, who looked good. It was an ECW-style match with enough gimmicks to where it was watchable even in spots it wasn't very good. One funny part was Matsunaga having Toryu in the choke sleeper, and Toryu immediately pulled up his pants that were falling down, which got everyone to laugh. Perez did a space-flying tiger drop during the finish. 1.75 stars. 2. Jason the Terrible pinned Nanjo Hayato in 8:20 with a Northern Lights bomb. Hayato is small but did every flying move in the book to carry the match, and it had lots of near falls. This was actually the opener at the stadium and was an excellent opening match. 3.5 stars. 3. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson and Ricky Fuji beat Boogie Man and Freddy Krueger and Crypt Keeper. It was heavily edited but at best looked like a fair match. 4. Ryuma Go and Samurai Max beat Imajin and Uchu Majin Silver X when Go pinned one of them with a rolling crotch hold. It was a comedy match, but not as bad as you'd think. 1.25 stars. 5. Takumi Michinoku pinned Koji Nakagawa to win the Independent Junior title in 15:39 after 3 Michinoku drivers, similar to Tombstone Pile drivers. Nakagawa didn't look good, but Michinoku did a great job of carrying him and it turned into a very good match. 3.5 stars. 6. Terry Funk and Mr. Pogo beat Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka in 1901. They started by teasing sending each other into the explosive barbed wire that surrounded the ring on 2 sides, or to the floor, which had barbed wire and landmines on the other 2 sides. Finally, Tanaka went into the barbed wire and got the first explosion. Pogo pulled out an ice pick and used it on both while Funk was pounding at Hayabusa's knee with a chair. Pogo carved Tanaka's shoulder and back up. While it ended up with 4-way juice, it wasn't as bloody as you'd think. Pogo then got a huge steak knife and cut more of Tanaka's shoulder and back. Tanaka got right back up from it unrealistically, and the two dropped Funk's stomach on the barbed wire for an explosion. Pogo and Hayabusa both rolled to the floor and were blown up. Hayabusa did a running dive on the side with no ropes, tackling Pogo on the floor. Funk and Tanaka fell to the floor and got an explosion. Pogo dropped Hayabusa on the ropes for another explosion. At the 15-minute mark was the Big Bang. All these explosions in succession caused the heat to be incredible, as the fans chanted for the guys to recover from the Big Bang. Funk and Pogo did a double facebuster on Hayabusa onto a flaming chair. Actually, they missed dropping him on the chair, for a near fall. Pogo blew fire at Tanaka and then both flew fire at Hayabusa before using a stuffed powerbomb, and Funk pinned him. After the match, they both used a knife to cut off Hayabusa's mask and he was carried out without the mask on a stretcher. Overall, it was an amazing spectacle with a lot of drama and great psychology and timing of when to do what. The wrestling itself in spots looked like indie wrestling. 3.75 stars. EMLL Felino captured Group B of the CMLL welterweight title tournament, beating Ciclone Ramirez in the finals on May 14th at Arena Coliseo. The last 2 matches of the tourney where Felino beat Ramirez and Angel Azteca were the 2 best ones. Yone Jinjin from Michinoku Pro Wrestling worked the show but lost to Ramirez in the first round. This sets up Felino vs Mascara Magica for the vacant title on May 21st. Felino also headlined the May 17th show at Arena Coliseum in his first singles meeting with Dandy since the feud started with something of a revered, dusty finish. After a ref bump, Felino takes off his own mask and throws it at Dandy. Felino then tries to revive the ref to show him Dandy holding his mask for the DQ, but before the ref revived, Dandy kicked Felino low and put him in a submission, and when the ref came to, he saw Felino giving up and awarded the win to Dandy. Vampiro and Sangre Chicana had a hair versus hair match on May 19th in Monterrey, which I'm sure Chicana lost. That was a head-to-head deal since AAA was doing a TV taping that same night in the same city with Pero Aguayo and Octagon and Mascara Sagrada Jr. versus Jason the Terrible and Pierroth Jr. and Killer on top. AAA. Juventud Guerrera captured the WWA World Welterweight title from Rey Mysterio Jr. on April 28 in Querétaro. The two were scheduled for a rematch on May 15 in Naucalpan, but Mysterio Jr. is still gone on his honeymoon and Guerrera had his foot in a cast and is on crutches after the Chicago match. Instead they sub Blue Demon Jr. defending his Mexican Cruiserweight title against Caris La Momia, and Caris captured the title. That show was on Ref Pepe Casas' 63rd birthday, and his son Heavy Metal gave him a birthday cake, and wouldn't you know it, nobody's face ended up in the cake. Heavy then worked his regular match as a heel. The main event saw Killer and Jason the Terrible and Pierroth Jr. beat Conan and Pero Aguayo and La Parca. Janet kept interfering and finally Conan picked her up for a suplex, but Killer fouled him and pinned him. Janet had super heat. They held a tag team tournament on May 17th in Nezahualcóyotl with Parca and Mascara Sagrada Jr. beating Cien Caris and Pierroth Jr. in the finals when the latter two had a falling out, leading to a singles match between the company's top two heels on May 24th. Mascara Sagrada and Octagonchito have returned. There is also a show on May 24th in Tijuana with Pero Aguayo and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Tinieblas Jr. versus Villano 3 and 2 Payasos on top before the June 2nd show, which is tentatively scheduled to feature the AAA debut of Corazon de Leon Chris Jericho. All Japan. They started a new tour with shows on May 17th and May 18th at Korakuen Hall, both of which sold out. The first night had a special six-man tag where the amateur wrestling trio of Gary Albright and Tomo Honda and Toshiaki Kawada lost to Steve Williams and Johnny Ace and the Patriot. The next night saw a surprise main event finish as Giant Kimala 2, Ben Peacock, got a rare main event teaming with Kenta Kobashi and Honda to beat Kawada and Akira Tao, and Takao Mori went 2-pin to Mori. 2 is starting to get a little push to give him a little credibility since he's mainly been Abdullah the Butcher's tag partner for years, but Butcher is gone. There's some heat on All Japan because they announced their match for the Rikidozan Memorial Interpromotional Show as Masao Inoue vs Mitsuo Momota. Momota got the pick because he's the son of Rikidozan. However, the newspapers and some mags are critical of Baba since most of the groups are sending top guys and they expected Baba to send Mitsuharu Misawa and Kobashi. However, All Japan has Korakuen Hall booked on June 30th and Baba said he needs the top names to work the company's show. Major shows this week on May 23rd and May 24th, both at Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center. First night has Tao and Kawada defending the tag titles against Misawa and Akiyama, Williams vs Albright and Yoshinari Ogawa defending the PWF Junior title against Satoru Asako. May 24th has Misawa vs Tao for the Triple Crown, Kobashi vs Kawada to determine who gets the Triple Crown show on June 7th, and Williams and Ace vs Albright and Akiyama. April 28th television show did a 3.8 rating for the six-man with Kawada and Albright and Ace vs Akiyama and Kobashi and Misawa, while the May 5th show did a 1.7. New Japan. The top of the Super Junior Tour starts on May 23rd. They announced an all-junior heavyweight show on June 17th at Budokan Hall with 7 title matches, headlined by Great Sasuke vs Black Tiger, Eddie Guerrero. For the IWGP Junior title, Dick Togo defends the British Junior title against Jushin Liger. Ultimo Dragon defends the International Junior title against Gran Naniwa. Super Delphin defends the CMLL Welterweight title against Taka Michinoku. The former tag partners have split up because Taka wants to do serious wrestling and claims that Delphin is holding him back doing the comedy wrestling. Shinjiro Otani defends the UWA Light Heavyweight title against Kenichi Yamamoto. Masayoshi Motegi defends the NWA Junior title against Shiryu, and Lance Storm and Yuji Yasuroka defend the International Junior Tag Team titles against El Samurai and Norio Onaga. As it turns out, it'll be Riki Choshu and Tatsumi Fujinami versus Genichiro Tenryu and Koji Kiao in the main event on the June 30th Rikidozan show. Kiao's rep took a pounding by losing in 47 seconds to Mark Hall. However, it was a big boost to Dan Severn in Japan. The Giant will defend the WCW title on New Japan shows on July 23rd, and July 24th in Sapporo. Also coming for those 2 dates are Ric Flair, Randy Savage, and Sting. The Golden Cups, Yoji Anjo and Yoshihiro Takayama and Yamamoto, are doing an angle where they are forming their own group and all are going to wear machine masks and be a masked trio called the Super 200% Machines. They will work not only UWFI and New Japan but war at other groups as free agents and are doing an angle in UWFI where they challenge Nobuhiko Takada to a singles match, and if they win, Takada must join their group and they get a chance to book the UWFI. Tenryu and Takada are doing an angle to build to their singles match. Tenryu faces UWFI's Tatsuo Nakano on May 26 while Takada faces War's Arashi, Isao Takagi, on June 7 in Sapporo on a UWFI show. May 6, the television show, which aired on a Monday afternoon from 4 to 5 p.m. with the Hashimoto Takada and Liger Sasuke title changes, did a 9.8 rating. Muta Hakushi and Fujinami Tenryu, back in the regular slot on May 11, did a 2.3. Other Japan notes. The surprise of the week was All Japan Women's putting on a show called Women Pro Wrestling Dream and Future Junior All-Stars, which consisted of 13 interpromotional matches but with no major names. See results page. But because of the mixed promotions gimmick, drew a sellout 4,800 to Ota Ward Gym in Tokyo. AJW announced it would attempt for the first time in its history to run Budokan Hall on 2 straight nights on August 12 and August 13. The shows will consist of a 16-team interpromotional tag team tournament and an 8-woman UFC tournament. Linus Asuka and Yumiko Hata are in the UFC tournament. No word on Shinobu Kondori, although it's rumored she'll be in, as she's generally considered the toughest of all the women wrestlers in Japan since she went to the finals of the first L1 UFC-style tourney last year before losing to a giant Soviet judo player. The tourney will have 4 pro wrestlers and 4 more from other sports. FMW is continuing its Hayabusa angle. Hayabusa went to Florida last week after Kawasaki Stadium, where many of the New Japan wrestlers were doing the Disney stuff. The mags had photos of Hayabusa without his mask laying by the pool and hanging out with Liger. FMW then suspended Hayabusa. He actually needs to take more time off because of all his injuries, but they needed him to work Kawasaki Stadium. It's all basically a work to tease that he may jump to New Japan because he's mad at Onita, but the angle may become reality since New Japan does have an interest. Big Japan Pro Wrestling is bringing in the latest Terrible Ted, the wrestling bear from Atlanta, for a 3-week tour in July. Wrestling bears named Terrible Ted and Victor were actually decent attractions in some regional promotions during the 60s, but they pretty well had faded away by the 70s, in some cases legislated out, and in other cases the audience got too sophisticated to buy the acts, as it isn't like the bears could be taught to do high spots. War has a tour June 3rd to June 15th with Lionheart, Big Titan, and Damien. Opening night at Korakuen Hall has Gedo and Jado and Hiromichi Fuyuki vs Michinoku's Dick Togo and Men's Tao and Shiryu. The biggest show is the final night at Hakata Star Lanes with a 6-man title match with Gedo and Jado and Fuyuki versus the Golden Cups and Tenryu and Ultimo Dragon versus Lionheart and Titan. JWP ran Korakuen Hall on May 14th, drawing a near-packed house for a street fight death match with Mayumi Ozaki versus Takako Inoue. It was the old falls don't count deathmatch rules, with Inoue winning 4 of the first 6 falls before not answering the bell for the 7th floor after being power-bombed on a chain through a table and being punched several times with the chain. Double juice match lasted 35-10. Some notes on recent videos I've seen. Saw the April 26 Rings show and none of the matches were shoots, but the main event with Yoshihisa Yamamoto vs Tsuyoshi Kosaka was a great shoot-style match and probably the best Rings match so far this year. With Akira Maeda on the shelf after knee surgery, crowds are down with Yamamoto in the main event slot, as Maeda is still a draw even though he's washed up. The new Tiger Mask, Michinoku, is a great worker for someone who is less than 1 year in. What's amazing about him is that he's got the same physique and does all the same moves and has the same mannerisms that Satoru Sayama had 15 years ago. It's an amazing copy. Sayama was his trainer. USWA Jerry Lawler is undergoing a character change, and get that over. He teamed with Bill Dundee at the live TV show on May 18th to win the USWA tag titles from the Cyberpunks. I guess logic has finally gotten to Lawler about the fact his 180-degree different personality in WWF and USWA just makes area fans all think wrestling is a joke, and they are working at making his USWA persona similar to his smartass WWF persona, although not necessarily making him a heel. Dundee came out when the show started and said he had a mystery partner in a tag title match and that Lawler would be his partner. Lawler came out acting as a heel and the match ended with Dundee hitting his son with a chain for the pin. After the match, Dave Brown asked Lawler if he'd accept the title win since Dundee used a chain, and Lawler, who was looking at it at the time, claimed he didn't see it and also For the 306th time going back 15 years, said the old king was back and his goal is to win all the titles. He said he doesn't necessarily like Dundee and has nothing against the Cyberpunks, but Dundee offered him a chance to win a title, so he took the shot. Lawler then did color during the show and did it exactly like he does on WWF television. However, later in the show Lawler, still acting like his WWF persona, was a babyface as he got into an argument with Reggie B. Fine and wound up throwing fire at him, and on the May 20th Memphis show, the main event was Lawler defending the USWA title against King Mabel. They appeared to be building toward a hair versus hair match with Samantha and Miss Texas. Samantha came out saying she was going to cut Texas hair. Dundee came out and held Texas, and they cut a little bit of hair until Cyberpunk Fire came out and held Samantha, allowing Texas to cut some of her hair. A newcomer debuted called J.R. Mulligan, a protege of Dennis Condrey's from Colorado who was described as super awful. Jeff Jarrett wasn't around again, so they did a series of angles with Tony Falk on television with Frank Morrell. Morrell said that the boss, Ronnie Gossett, also not there, was upset at Falk for losing the TV title to Jesse James Armstrong. They had a rematch with Armstrong winning. Morrell brought out a belt and began whipping Falk. Falk challenged Armstrong to another match and lost again. Falk then challenged Armstrong to yet another match and was about to lose when Morrell interfered for the DQ. Besides Lawler Mabel, the other top matches this week were Dundee vs. Fire in a barbed wire match and Brian Christopher vs. Sir Mo in a chain match. ECW, the debut show in Allentown, Pennsylvania on May 18th drew an estimated 1,200 fans, which could be the largest crowd outside of New York or Philadelphia in the history of the promotion. There were problems with the building which ordered no brawling outside the ring, no chair or guardrail shots, and no going over the barricades. At one point after a chair shot after the Pitbulls vs. Bruise Brothers match, which was the third match on the show, they wanted to shut the show down. The crowd was really into the show early, but by the end of the show the crowd reaction was disappointing and a lot of people left before the main event and apparently were unhappy about the triangle match which had no crowd heat. Taz beat Too Cold Scorpio in a matter of seconds with a choke after Shane Douglas distracted Scorpio. Taz said he waited 1 year to finally get back at Scorpio. Sabu beat Mikey Whipwreck in the best match on the show, which got over really strong. They did a TV angle where Raven came out with Stevie Richards, who this week said his name was Stevie Alexander Bagwell, and his tag partner Blue Meanie Riggs wearing vets, shades and jumping around like fruitcakes, singing the American Males theme song. They also introduced Supernova as their new flunky and he was jumping around like Leif Cassidy. Raven told Richards to find him a whore as slutty as the women in Allentown. During the angle, Joey Styles told Richards that he's just as cool as the real American Males. The idea is to keep presenting Raven with slutty new valets, and he keeps turning them down until they find the right one, which may turn out being Peaches, who is the real-life wife of Sandman. They had a three-way dance for the TV title with Douglas, Sandman, and Tommy Dreamer. However, Sandman really couldn't work because he legit blew out his knee last week at the ECW Arena show. He came to the ring on crutches and tried to work anyway, but Douglas put him in an Indian deathlock. Missy Hyatt tried to throw in the towel, but Sandman wouldn't let her. Finally, Scorpio came out and superkicked Douglas, Dreamer, and accidentally kicked Sandman as well. Scorpio took Sandman's place in the match. Dreamer was eliminated first and finally Douglas pinned Scorpio to keep the title. Main event was the first tag title match with Eliminators vs. Gangstas, which is going to be the main event feud for a while. New Jack and Saturn did wind up brawling in the crowd, but it was described as a disappointing match, with New Jack legitimately knocking himself out by missing a leap off the top rope with a chair and having the chair hit his own head when Saturn moved. They actually had to do some impromptu stuff until New Jack got his bearings back because he was limp and they couldn't get him up to do the total elimination. New Jack's head was busted open hard way when he got cold-cocked by the chair. On the undercard, Big Titan came out in a total razor Ramon get-up as Slice and Dice Ramirez with a toothpick and the slicked hair and the Cuban accent. Raven beat Chris Jericho in the ECW title match, which was a disappointment as well. The other weekend show was May 17th in Glenolden, Pennsylvania before 250 fans. During the Raven vs. Whipwreck title match, Richards and Meanie did their American Males gimmick and started singing. Then JT Smith came out and began singing Sinatra before Whipwreck cleared all three from the ring. In singles matches, Cronus beat Mustafa and New Jack pinned Saturn. The first meeting of Scorpio vs. Jericho was a Japanese-style match which I'm told was a good match that didn't get over with the crowd. After the match, Douglas jumped Scorpio and Jericho tried to save Scorpio, but Douglas hit him in the mouth with the TV title as Jericho tried to tope Douglas. Scorpio made a comeback and had Douglas pinned while Jericho counted to 3. Douglas then challenged anyone in the dressing room, and Bad Crew came out and he destroyed them. Main event saw Brian Lee beat Dreamer in a Falls Count Anywhere match which went out of the building and into someone's front yard with fans chanting ECW, ECW in the street. Bruise Brothers interfered to give Lee the win. ECW lost its 5 p.m. time slot on Sports Channel Philadelphia effective the first week of June. They'll maintain the other 3 weekly slots, 11 p.m. Tuesday night, 2 a.m. Friday and 1 a.m. Monday. They've added CH 48 in the Philadelphia area for Wednesday night at 10 p.m. and Tuesday at midnight showings. May 31st in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania is a battle royal. Winner meets Raven that night, and the second to last survivor meets Douglas for the TV title that night. June 1st at ECW Arena is Eliminators vs. Gangstas for the tag titles, Douglas vs. Scorpio for TV title, Dreamer and Pit Bulls vs. Bruise Brothers and Lee in a Falls Count Anywhere elimination match. The latest target date for a first pay-per-view is the fall, perhaps the November to Remember show. At the last Philadelphia show, the reason the stuff in the post-match with Sabu and Rob Van Dam came off so clumsy is that Sabu was legit knocked silly by a brainbuster off the top rope and was dizzy in the ring and taken to the back, brought back out to say respect, and then carried out on a stretcher because he was so dizzy. Since Sabu is in Japan this week, the next Sabu Van Dam match won't be until June 22nd at the ECW Arena, either in an I Quit or stretcher matches that is being groomed to be a blowout show. They are apparently setting up an angle to bring New Jack's wife back. She did an angle a few shows back but hasn't been heard from since, and end up in a dance-off against Kimona. Van Dam was over big as a heel in both cities. Among the weekend injuries with Pitbull number 1, staph infection in leg, whipwreck, shoulder, Jericho, eye swollen, and Raven, foot still hurting. Dreamer took a groin kick which actually landed and he was hurting bad but ended up being okay. A correction from last week. During the Jericho vs. Whipwreck match at the ECW Arena, the fans weren't chanting "This match sucks," they were chanting "This ref sucks" because Paul Richards' near falls counts were screwing up the match. There is talk of running a show at Roseland in Manhattan in late June. Here and there. A few more Peace Festival notes. WCW sent New Japan a letter saying they wanted signed papers saying that none of their wrestlers would appear on any television shoot or video shoot from the show or they would pull out of the show. Peace Festival officials have known all along that none of the WCW talent could appear on the video or television shoot, so it shouldn't be a stumbling block. On the WCW local television show that airs in the LA market and national shows, there have been no mentions at all made of this show. Dan Severn after UFC said he didn't know if he'd be doing the show because he also had a seminar booked that weekend, and would be making a decision at the end of the week. Nobuhiko Takada is iffy since he's got 2 shows, May 27th and June 7th, in Japan against Fujiwara and Arashi, and KGB vs. Craig Pittman and Jim Neidhart vs. Mondo Guerrero now look to be the first 2 matches. Severn, Kanan, Pero Aguayo and Inoki are scheduled to come into town early for promotional work the last few days. There are other activities scheduled in conjunction with the show, including a food festival and a banquet. T.C. Martin's NWC in Las Vegas ran its first show in months on May 17th, before 500 fans. Told the best match was a mid-card match with Damien, AAA, and D-Dog, Pero Russo from AAA, versus Superboy and Principe Indu. The 3 main events were said to have been brutal, with Larry Powers over Zuma KGB via DQ, Virgil over Honky Tonk Man and Sabu over Kama via DQ. They come back on June 15th with a triangle match with Sabu, Kama and Virgil plus Rob Van Dam and Bobby Bradley Jr. versus Warlord and Barbarian and Iron Sheik. Peach State Wrestling on June 7th in Cordell, Georgia has Terry Taylor versus Billy Black, Rock and Roll Express versus PYTs, Fred Avery and Jim Bryant, R.D. Swain versus Steve Dahl, Rex King versus Joey Maggs, and an interview segment where Brian Pillman interviews Maggs. If you mention the Observer at the box office you get $1 off any ticket. NWA on June 8th in Yardville, New Jersey has PG-13 versus Reckless Youth and Ace Darling, King Kong Bundy versus Johnny Gunn, and a triangle match with Tommy Cairo, Derek Domino and D. Low Brown, or Ian Rotten. 911 is undergoing knee surgery. May 25th in Pueblo, Colorado and May 26th in Commerce City, Colorado, near Denver, has Tito Santana versus Iron Sheik. Chris Adams' Mid-South Wrestling Reunion Tour will be July 4th through July 6th in Shreveport, Monroe and New Orleans respectively. The American Wrestling Association with its old insignia and Vern Gagne as president is reforming with its first show on July 13th in Rochester, Minnesota. The only photos on the poster for the first show are Tom Zenk and Baron von Raschke, who would be 55 years old now, although he looked 55 when he was 40. Besides Gagne, The office crew will be VP Dale Gagner, road agent Eddie Sharkey, CFO Robert Butto, and promoter Tom Showalter. Amazing to see Gagne and Sharkey on the same team, but this is pro wrestling. IPWA on June 7th in Alexandria, Virginia has Severn Bundy, Virgil Tatanka, and Johnny Gunn. UWL on June 9th at the Paterson, New Jersey Boys and Girls Club. A group called Quad Cities Ultimate ran a UFC-style show on May 11th in Moline, Illinois, which drew between 4,000 and 5,000 fans with no major names. It was the promotion's second show in the area, with the first one drawing almost 6,000 fans. There was a really interesting series of articles on the show in the Rock Island Argus. Barbickies wrote that she talked to a sports photographer who said he'd seen more blood and injuries at a typical football game, but then said he'd allow his kid to play football but not do this. Mentally, I'm not even sure of the distinction, but it's there. Ickes wrote, the rotten part for me is that it reminds me of a fight on the playground, where kids circle the fighters and cheer them on. The disturbing difference, of course, is both fighters and cheerers are adults. Many of those adults weren't doing their cheering during moments of athletic moves of shrewd defense and strategy. They yelled loudest when fighters took the hardest blows to the face. Am I proposing a ban on the kind of fight I watched at the Mark Saturday? No. I didn't like it, will never go again, and will need a couple of days to stop feeling lousy about it. But more than 4,000 people seem to be enjoying themselves. Even though that's the worst part of it for me, it lends me all the logic I need to defend the sport. Besides, nobody got seriously hurt, and I'm counting myself. The latest in wrestling promotional wars. A new group called New People's Wrestling Federation was scheduled to debut on May 18th in Oregon but had to cancel the show due to bomb threats at the building. Got a message that the Ray Stevens family wants to thank everyone in wrestling that sent flowers and donations made in Ray's name for their kindness. UFC already signed for the July 12th pay-per-view show, which will be a tourney only, no super fight, from Providence, Rhode Island, provided they aren't stopped, are Gary Goodridge, Brian Johnston, judo heavyweight, Frank Loebman, kickboxing heavyweight from Holland who is a former European champion, John Campatella, Kempo karate who supposedly is a great ground fighter as well, and they are hoping for Mark Schultz. It appears it's another show to create new stars to build for September, where they'll put on a tourney with names that are already stars such as the likes of Don Fry and or Oleg Toktarov, and a super fight on top. WCW. Nitro on May 20th in Monroe, Louisiana before 4,000 fans, 3,029 fans paying $34,792, was a 90-minute show with Steiners going to a double countout with Scott Norton and Ice Train in 5:29. Some good power moves early, but it got sloppy and the finish was crap, 2 1/4 stars. Ric Flair pinned Eddie Guerrero in 1943 while holding the figure four and also holding woman's arms for leverage. They chopped the hell out of each other. It was a basic Flair match, but he had a great opponent to work with. Best match on Nitro in a long time, 3 3/4 stars. Flair, who with the exception of Michaels is the best all-around performer in the US right now, because his interviews and persona are so strong in this savage angle, did another great interview and wound up doing commentary for the rest of the show since thankfully Steve McMichael was in Atlanta training for his debut. Sting and Lex Luger beat Meng and Barbarian in 10:52 when Sting splashed Barbarian off the top and Luger pinned him, 1 1/2 star. Diamond Dallas Page pinned Brad Armstrong with the Diamond Cutter in 7:47, 1 1/2 star. And they wonder why nobody takes Armstrong seriously? They announced Page not getting the title shot because, as Gene Okerlund said, his foot was on the floor when he made the pin. Giant pinned Arnold Anderson in 3:38 with a choke slam in one of the worst world title matches you'll ever see. 1/4 of 1 star. WCW Nitro did a 2.3 rating and 4.5 share on May 20th, while Raw Unopposed did a 3.1 rating and 4.7 share. Nitro Replay did a 1.0 and 3.6 share. Saturday Night felt the warm weather for the first time, falling to a 2.0, while Main Event before the pay-per-view did a 1.9 and Pro a 1.2. WCW Saturday Night tapings on May 15th in Montgomery, Alabama before 2,085 fans, 1,300 paying $15,000. Saw Sting beat Meng, Jushin Liger over Steve Dahl, Kevin Sullivan and Chris Benoit as a tag team, Page over Billy Kidman and Barbarian over Jim Duggan via DQ when Duggan used the 2x4. In both the first and last match they began teasing a Barbarian/Meng split, but that may have been to build interest for the pay-per-view. Sure worked, huh? For the May 25th TV show, Steiners over males in a good match. Steiners then challenged Sting and Luger for a tag title match. Booty Man Squash. Harlem Heat beat Men at Work, Mark Starr and Mike Wenner, when Booker T pinned Starr with the hangover, but landed with his butt on Starr's face and knocked him silly and he needed to be helped to the dressing room. He then challenged Sting and Luger for the tag title. Sting beat Regal. Final was an angle where Savage ran into the ring. Chip Burnham then said that because of what happened at Slamboree, Savage was indefinitely suspended from television, so he can still work arenas, but not PPVs. Savage attacked Burnham, complete with the top rope elbow. Police tried to arrest Savage but he ran away and escaped. Renegade was dispatched from the company. It was yet another example of their nearly foolproof policy, as in the only ones it catches are the fools. Brian Clark, Adam Bomb, denies he's going to WCW as part of Blood Runs Cold. There were also rumors that Hakushi would be part of the three-man team, and I'm pretty sure that isn't the case either. Hakushi's WWF contract probably wouldn't expire until late November at the earliest, and he was at Madison Square Garden on May 19th with his wife and new baby and talked about returning to the company. The only name I know for sure as part of the three-man Ninja Force is David Ashford Smith, who was last in WCW a few years back as Yoshi Kwan, better known as Chris Champion. Kevin Green and Steve McMichael were training all week at the power plant with Terry Taylor. Reports we have are that McMichael was doing well as far as personality goes while Green was a little shy, but that Green was ahead athletically. Rumors that they are teaching McMichael to do a moonsault as his finisher were apparently just a practical joke started by Disco Inferno. Chad Brock got another tryout but looked bad. Chavito Guerrero, the son of Chavo Guerrero, nephew of Eddie, got a tryout at the Nitro tapings but haven't heard how he did. Akira Hokuto will wrestle Bull Nakano on the June 3rd Nitro from Asheville, North Carolina. Road Warriors were on WXRT in Chicago. The host, Mancow, talked about how Ultimate Warrior looks like a midget now, must be the world's largest and most muscular midget in history, which led the Warriors to talk about WCW's foolproof steroid policy and mention they used them in the past but not anymore, and said they don't think it's fair that Bill Clinton isn't drug tested but they have to be. The other house show of this past week was May 18th in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which drew a $38,000 house and about 4,000 fans. If this past week is any indication, expect more interviews and longer matches now that Nitro goes 2 hours. At virtually every WWF and WCW pay-per-view event, whether the show is good or bad, people usually delude themselves into thinking it was a great show. However, nobody even in the company was deluding themselves about how bad the Battle Bowl aspect of the pay-per-view was, and how dead it was for page winning. They're talking about bringing in Chris Jericho later in the year. David Finlay won't be back until 1997. WWF. Although business has generally been great, the advance for the pay-per-view on May 26th in Florence, South Carolina as of press time was less than 1,800 tickets in a 9,400-seat arena. King of the Ring is about 60% sold out, however, and that's before a card has even been announced. Reports are that Jim Hellwig is easier to get along with this time than he was in the past. Hellwig did arrive 2 hours late for an autograph session the day of the MSG show. They are trying to combine tailgate parties with shows later in the year. On July 6th, before a show in New Haven, they are going to have Doak Hendricks Band playing at a pre-show outdoor autograph party starting at 4 p.m. Ditto the July 5th show at the Meadowlands. Next Madison Square Garden is August 9th. Davey Boy Smith interfered in all the Michaels Diesel matches, teasing false finishes. Reports are that Smith was getting a great heel reaction every night. At MSG, Steve Austin pinned Jake Roberts in about 3 minutes. After the match, Austin told Roberts he was washed up and challenged him to another match. Austin then pinned him again. I guess they are going to use Roberts' name value to give the younger guys some credibility, which you have to give Roberts credit as a team player for, since his days as a headliner are over. The finish of the Smith vs. Roberts match on Raw on May 20th, where Roberts won via count out, didn't air. The show went off the air with the match in progress. It didn't make much sense to have Smith lose, even if he wasn't pinned, in his final TV before a world title shot. Yokozuna returned, having lost by his own accounts 33 pounds. At his size, it's hard to really notice. He suffered some sort of a calf bruise immediately upon returning, but he's able to work with it. After the pay-per-view, he's supposed to go back to Duke Weight Loss Clinic for another 4 weeks. Besides Raw, the Action Zone did a 2.1 rating on May 19th, while Mania did a 1.1. The 2.1 rating would be the first time in many months where WCW Saturday Night wouldn't have been the highest-rated show of the weekend. On the May 13th Raw, they edited the Goldust/Undertaker angle. As Goldust started licking the leg, they immediately changed the camera angle to not make it look so bad and jump cut to him sitting up. It was still bad, but in the edited form, it wasn't nearly as bad as it was described by those seeing it live. They are hopeful Goldust will be able to work a decent match with Undertaker this weekend, but nothing is certain. It was basically a last-day call that he wasn't going to work the weekend house shows. They are adding to the Michaels angle by having Marty Jannetty talk about all the things Michaels used to do in the past. Michaels will be in the October issue of Playgirl. The whole angle is almost a spoof on McMahon and Hulk Hogan's problems in 1991-1992, complete with women from their past, friends from their past, stories from their past, and some untrue allegations. Not that what came out during that period in real life wasn't true. I'm sure some was and some wasn't. The readers' pages. WCW. I'm amazed how WCW has changed since 1984. I've always been a WCW fan because when I started watching wrestling, the NWA was the only wrestling in this area. I attended my first house show in Norfolk at the Scope in 1984, and I've been with my family to just about every card in the building since then. I was really looking forward to World War III, but I thought the show was pretty bad and I wasn't happy that Sabu was a no-show. The crowd was dead for most of the show. I thought the best match was Kensuke Sasaki versus Chris Benoit, but the crowd was completely dead during the match, including the guy behind me who was asleep during the match. I really think a lot of the heat Eric Bischoff takes is wrong. I feel Bischoff would like to push Benoit, Conan, Eddie Guerrero, and Dean Malenko, but he knows that a lot of the fans wouldn't purchase the PPVs if Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair and Randy Savage weren't the headliners. I must also commend Bischoff for setting up working agreements with New Japan and AAA. What has ticked me off about WCW is bringing in WWF has-beens like Zeus, VK Wall Street, Jim Duggan, and Elizabeth. My family thinks we'll have to see Papa Shango, Doink and Slick next. The other thing that ticks me off is on Nitro, if Guerrero, Benoit or Conan are on the show, they'll take commercial breaks during the middle of their matches, and what makes me even madder is how the announcers on Nitro completely ignore their matches and instead talk about Flair, Savage, and Hogan. Bischoff needs to realize that none of the fans will accept anyone new as stars if they aren't pushed as stars. Dusty Rhodes and Steve McMichael need to vanish from wrestling forever. Having new talent reminds me a lot of when Bill Watts was running the show. During that period, he pushed a lot of young stars and had much more emphasis on wrestling and threw in violent matches with Cactus Jack. I enjoyed WCW during that time period, but the pay-per-view buy rates stunk. I attended a house show at the Scope during that time period and only 700 to 800 fans were there. It was the worst crowd I ever saw at the Scope. It took Hogan and Flair to save WCW, although the wrestling has gotten a lot worse. I'll close with some comments on ECW. I've been an avid ECW fan since late 1993 and am seeing a great organization start to downslide. When I first started watching ECW, they would have usually 2 matches that were wild brawls and the rest of the matches had some wrestling. Since Paul Heyman lost Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero, the wrestling has been scrapped and it's almost all street fighting. I still feel ECW is the best organization, but now that they no longer use the blade, they've lost their momentum. The Dudley gimmick has got to go. This idea of fans bringing objects to hand the wrestlers has gotten old. I believe ECW would probably work here if promoted right because they have a good time slot and the ratings are pretty good. But I can't believe ECW is even thinking of doing a pay-per-view show because outside of New York and Philadelphia, hardly anyone has ever even heard of them. Wesley Jones. Chesapeake, Virginia. Ray Stevens. As a longtime fan, I greatly enjoyed your article on the career of Ray Stevens. I remember fondly a great match I saw in 1961 at the Cincinnati Gardens with Stevens and Art Nielsen against the Bastian brothers. His work ethic is certainly something that could be emulated by some of today's stars. Phil Breen. Fort Thomas, Kentucky. The passing of Ray Stevens closes out another chapter of my childhood. In 1980, Anderson's Army was the highlight of my Saturday afternoons. Gene Anderson had great moments behind the mic and knew how to be the third man of the Ray Stevens and Jimmy Snuka tag team. Their matches against Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood were all incredible. Steamboat can sell as well as anyone, but the interview he did after Stevens and Snuka broke Youngblood's leg was one of his best. In 1981, Stevens returned and split and feuded with Ole Anderson and joined Steamboat as a tag team. Another series of great interviews by Ole. You gave credit to Stevens for making other wrestlers look good, but he also did things that made them sound good. The angles he did here in the Mid-Atlantic brought out the heat of the moment and inspired some of the most emotional or hate-filled interviews. What a talent he was. Bobby Yates. Randleman, North Carolina. Stevens' angle again. I enjoyed reading the story about Ray Stevens. An added footnote to the latter angle. During the 1960s, Pepper Gomez was involved in the same angle in Los Angeles with Fred Blassie. After selling his cast-iron stomach for approximately 2 months, Blassie accepted the Gomez challenge. As with Stevens, Blassie climbed up a few extra steps, to the 8th or 9th step, and landed a flying knee drop across Gomez's throat. Gomez sold it well as he spun all over the ring while on his back, and it drew a lot of heat. I could imagine how much heat it drew up north with Stevens involved in it. Has this angle ever been repeated since? Will the Goldust character ever be phased out? My wife's grandsons were recently over, on all nights, the night of the Callaway angle. Alexander Bohr. Diamond Bar, California. Women's wrestling. Don't you find it interesting that just as women's boxing is starting to crack open the door and Christy Martin made the cover of Sports Illustrated that the best thing pro wrestling can do with women is an angle with lesbian valets? Curtis Minato. Los Angeles, California. This is the end of this conversion. Be sure to comment and subscribe. See you next time.